World leaders from over 30 countries held talks hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss Ukraine's security during its ongoing conflict with Russia. The meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris brought together leaders from Europe, Australia, Canada, Japan, as well as the United States Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff. Zelenskyy says Kyiv and its allies have developed a shared vision for security guarantees against future Russian defiance. Macron, alongside Zelenskyy, announced that 26 of Ukraine's allies have pledged troops or equipment once a peace deal with Russia is secured. And following a call with U.S. President Donald Trump, Macron says that U.S. support for Ukraine's security guarantees will be finalized in the coming days. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that any Western troops deployed to Ukraine will be targets for Moscow to attack. And to talk more about this, we're now joined by Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, Thembisa Vakhuria. Thembisa, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. This seems like NATO without the name. Is that what it's become?
It is exactly what it's become, and Donald Trump has been the one actually, intent on destroying NATO and anything that encourages multilateralism. But importantly, we see lack of leadership. I mean, the European countries and former NATO members lack leadership. And Donald Trump will do as he pleases. How do you have a meeting with your allies and at the same time you tell them that any of you who go and fight or present human resource or food soldiers in Ukraine are will be exposing yourself to attack by Russia? So this is the man who don't necessarily know exactly what he's trying to say or what he says most of the time. And this time around, I think he's basically playing both Russia and NATO, or the European members that are currently involved in these discussions. And I don't see the United States moving forward to really acting constructively in trying to resolve the current standoff we see in Ukraine. Instead, I think they will insist on their transactional position, which has always been the case. It's about what's the benefit for the United States, not necessarily trying to solve the problem between Russia and Ukraine.
You have to evaluate this against the backdrop of China, Russia, and North Korea meeting. And of course, those visuals alone were quite scary to Trump. And he insinuated and speculated that they must have had a conversation about conspiring against the U.S. And that's the paranoia that he lives with. But all while that is happening, Russia's exports to China has increased by over 40% since 2002, in the last 3 years, that is. So that meeting wasn't just one around a conversation about security. It was a conversation around mutual interest, one would assume, but also collaborative efforts in trade and other bilateral touch points. Could that reshape the urgency around the global reconfiguration around what the security future of the world looks like?
Certainly, and what we've seen also, we've seen Trump over and above what you've just said, which is totally agreeing with, is that Trump has pushed India closer and closer to China. And India is now one of those countries. Not only are they benefiting from Russian oil, but you see this rapprochement between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping getting closer and closer. So this alliance is going to get close, and it's certainly going to be posing a threat, at least to the U.S. Alliances within the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, where it continues to have military partners with India. So India, not long ago, we know that J.D. Vance visited India with his family because of his wife's relationship with India. Many people were thinking that the relationship was going to be strengthened. But what we see happening, we're seeing India that's now moving closer to China because of the tariffs that have been imposed on India. And what you're therefore likely to see is that the alliances or the allies of the United States in that part of the world are now actually feeling pressure, particularly the Dalai Lama, who has been in exile for a very long time and is in exile in India. And I think you might just see China and India negotiating some sort of collaboration, and that will be bad news for the government in exile of Tibet, which is led at the moment by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, it seems like Narendra Modi isn't the only world leader that has experienced Trump and the US to be vexatious of late. Emmanuel Macron is one such person. He's been tightly drawn towards Trump and trying to negotiate peace in Russia and between Russia and Ukraine, but it doesn't seem to have made much progress. For him to set up this coalition of the willing, so to speak, and have a separate negotiation process that removes Trump as an axis in the movement thereof, seems to suggest that Emmanuel Macron and most of France's European allies have grown tired of the US and are beginning to consider a future where they secure themselves without the support of the US. What does that mean for diminishing global influence of the US?
Well, I'm not quite sure whether Trump is going to take that lying down. He's certainly going to be annoyed by it because he wants to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And if any of the European partners are pushing aside from attaining that goal, he's likely to get annoyed. And we've already had the rhetoric in that regard. So USA will want to be part and parcel of whatever solution that's going to come out of this. And if not, you are simply going to be pushing them closer to Vladimir Putin, with whom they've had a relationship, if you remember, when Trump resumed his second term. He was having a different tone of language in terms of his support of Ukraine. And now that you have these European unions forming their own coalition led by France, amongst others, Trump is certainly going to threaten them by saying that he's going to move closer to Russia, even though we know, of course, that is Russians have already tested Trump, and I don't think they're going to give in to any demands from Donald Trump. So it's a mess, it's a chaos, and nobody knows exactly what's going on. Putin is going to continue doing as he pleases, particularly now that he's got the economic way out of this by selling his oil to both China and India. Yeah. So the Russian economy is likely to be resuscitated with this relationship, and whatever it is that the Europeans are trying to do in a form of imposing additional sanctions on Russia, I don't think that's going to yield any results.
Yeah. Thembisa, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really do appreciate it. That is Thembisa Fakude, Director at the Africa-Asia Dialogue.